Hi folks, how you doing? Welcome to Organizational Illusions. My name is Dr. Troy Lepper. I am the founder of Organizational Illusions, and this is the first in a series of conversations about important topics that we at Organizational Illusions deals with in order to help your company be prepared to deal with the modern workforce and to create modern workspaces that incorporate this modern diverse workforce that is taking shape in the 21st century. Over the course of this video series that we're calling Let's Talk, we'll be talking about important concepts like diversity, equity, inclusion, race, class, gender, ethnicity, veteran status, those with special needs status. So, as I said, I felt that it was important for us at Organizational Illusions to let you know, our potential clients, what it is that we can offer you in reference to these important topics. So, let's talk about diversity. Diversity is an idea that has been, it's been with us for a long time, but it really started to be an important concept in the formation of the workforce in the mid-1960s. The civil rights protests that culminated in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 laid out the framework of how we needed to address diversity in the workforce as we moved forward with this new civil rights legislation. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was bolstered by the Equal Pay Rights Act, Age Discrimination Act. Both of those took place in the mid-60s to the late 1960s, and then of course the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was passed in the late 1980s, early 1990s. The concept of diversity in the workplace, as I mentioned, has been around for a long time, and these new pieces of legislation have been designed to protect what have historically been thought of as vulnerable populations. These vulnerable populations over time were not represented in the way we hired, and the federal government felt that it was important to pass legislation that would encourage companies, especially companies that were receiving federal funding, to hire a more diverse workforce. So when we're talking about diversity, really what we're talking about is hiring practices. And the idea of diversity, since it dates back to the mid-1960s, as you can imagine, is a familiar one with those in the world of human resources, which are those in the world of hiring. And they've been dealing with diversity for a long enough time that it no longer feels like it's a new topic for them. So when they talk about diversity, they're talking about a concept that they've been working with for a long time. And they've been working with it long enough to where they feel as if they've most likely moved past diversity, and they're willing to move on to some more important concepts. But at least at Organizational Illusions, we want those HR folks to not just think about diversity in the initial hiring process, but we also want them to think about diversity in reference to what it does to the actual workforce and the challenges it creates in the workspace. So for us at Organizational Illusions, we think about diversity in reference to, at least initially, the conflict that it creates in the workforce itself. So if you're looking at your workforce and it historically has been a homogeneous workforce, and what I mean by a homogeneous workforce is that those that you've hired have been of a similar type. Let's say that your workforce has traditionally been white and it's been male. Well, that white male workforce is most likely drawing off of the same cultural reference points, and therefore you don't have a whole lot of conflict in reference to how those people within your workforce think, the cultural cues that they draw off of. They most likely come from similar backgrounds. They most likely come from similar areas. So I'm not saying that there's no conflict in your workspace. There's always conflict in a workspace. But what I am saying is that that conflict is not due to cultural differences per se. But when you start hiring people from different cultural backgrounds, from different regions of the United States or different regions of the world, different genders, different sexual identities, all of a sudden this homogeneous workforce is heterogeneous. And this new diversity is not just diversity in the way people look, it's diversity in the way people think. And this is going to create some conflict in your workspace. No longer are people drawing from the same cultural reference points. And that type of difference is going to create some problems within your workforce. To me and to Organizational Illusions, it's going to create conflict. And successful 21st century workforces and companies that are embracing diversity are going to be successful if they understand how to move past the conflict that diversity brings initially and move it to something that's more cooperative and inclusive. And those companies understand that diversity is the starting point. But in order to get to inclusion, you really need to think about equity. So if we are thinking about diversity as one side of the divide and inclusion as the other side of the divide, then we're really going to need to understand how equity serves as a bridge between diversity and inclusion. And once we create an equitable workspace, then we can move into an inclusive workforce and workspace that allows for those working in it to, one, be happy coming to work every day because they feel as if they're included, and two, they can all start to work towards the overall purpose and mission of the organization itself. And that's really what we're after here, folks. We are after transforming your workforce into a cooperating unit that's all working towards the purpose and mission of your individual company. And once we get there, then the sky's the limit. Because once people start buying in to what the company's doing and feeling as if they are going to be equitably represented within that company's purpose and mission, then we're all working towards the same goal. And that's really what we're about, is getting everybody within our workspace working towards the same goal. And once they're working towards the same goal, then the company is no longer worried about what's going on in the workspace itself. They're worried about how do we maximize our labor force in reference to the purpose and mission that we laid out when we started the company in the first place.